Thank you for sticking around for the final session of the day and the training. So great to see everyone again. I really hope you've enjoyed your time with us and have gained information to help you expand your understanding and also spark curiosity to learn more. In this final session, I am hoping that we can bring together everything we've covered thus far and really explore how this content should impact our relationships, partnerships, and ultimately our coordinated community responses and our teams. So like I mentioned on the first day, this entire training is supported by the Advocating for Military Connected Survivors project, funded by the Office on Violence Against Women. We are grateful for their support, and everything that has been presented throughout this training does not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Justice. So before jumping into content, I would like to check in to see how everyone is feeling. So to connect to the poll, I'm going to add that link to the chat, or you can use the code by going to menti.com. So we have excited, hungry, need more caffeine, motivated, curious, or if there's others, you can add those to the chat as well. Need more caffeine. I hear you. I hope you refilled your caffeine beverage on your break. Curious. Need internet connection. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Ready for Friday. Yes, it's Friday Eve, everyone. We're almost there. Tired, but the training has been great. Thank you so much, Karen. Need more caffeine. Very informative. Motivated, hungry, happy it's almost the weekend. Well, thank you everyone for participating. I very much appreciate it. So our learning objectives for today are to explore a collective approach to addressing domestic and dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, and also to examine what that means for both military and civilian teams, and also provide foundational knowledge with the understanding that depending on your agency and organization, your CCR team may look different. So please understand the information that is provided today is really foundational and can help you to learn more and spark that curiosity. Excuse me. So getting started with collective impact, one of the foundational approaches that NOVA utilizes for our coordinated community response is collective impact, which basically means that it's an all-team effort. And this approach is used because we believe the whole community needs to be involved in addressing domestic and dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, understanding that we cannot do this work alone. And the collective approach helps us to address these issues together. The CCR team, as you may know, is a group that is diverse, multidisciplinary, and who commit to a common agenda to achieve systems level change. The collective impact approach that has worked, in a wide range of social issues, and NOVA has implemented it successfully, beginning even with our campus programs. So the purpose of collective impact is to not only bring multiple folks to the table, but also to achieve alignment. For example, many folks in this field, as we know, are addressing the issue from their own perspectives or disciplines, and often the programs they develop compete with one another or can even be contradictory in their messaging. So one of the things that collective approach does is it makes sure that programs are consistent and reinforcing, and that will ultimately create less work for overstressed systems and staff members. As we know, it can be significantly challenging when we're overworked, stressed, and understaffed. And if you'd like to learn more about the collective impact approach, I'm going to add that link to the chat as well. And I see someone in the chat says, I have chicken tacos from the taqueria on the way. I'm jealous. And moving into CCRs, we do have a couple more interactive questions, so I can get a little bit more insight into your experiences. So again, feel free to join that mentee. I will re-put that in the chat. So are you currently part of a coordinated community response team? Yes, no, or I don't know. Have yes, some no's. I see yes in the chat and no. I see an I don't know. Thank you for your honesty. It's okay, no wrong answers. And as those are continuing to come in, for those that said yes, I would like to ask, are they community civilian only, or are they a combination of a military and civilian? And you can write that in the chat. I see one that says both. Awesome. Civilian only. Thank you. Civilian, both civilian, combination. Right now, only civilian. Community, but I really want to integrate more military. Thank you. Military. So it's good to see that we kind of have a mix. And if there's any successes or resources that you all have used when creating a CCR, please feel free to share with your fellow attendees. Again, creating that collective approach so we can all be better to respond to these crimes. So for this one, it is short answer, and it says, what was your experience like with the CCRs? So if you feel comfortable writing in a few words, a short sentence, was the experience good, bad, combination? What was your experience like with the CCRs? I see in the chat good. Anyone else? Enlightening, thank you. Good. Agencies fighting over who is in charge. That's unfortunate, but it also is common. Informative. It's been great, so productive. Worked with them a few times and was good. Awesome. In the chat, my experience was great and continual. I feel good about it, but can you explain more? Yes, I will be. Collaborative, great, good, and okay, and able to learn. I also see lots of learning, helpful. It's good overall, but it can be hard to make sure there's an equal amount of engagement and input. Yes, another common challenge. In the chat, it says one points the finger at the other. Yes, that is also common. Cooperative. Let me hide this QR code. Rough at first because people were territorial, but after developing trust, it was impactful. Thank you. We'll talk about that. A few bumps along the way, but mostly collaborative. That is great news. So a combination, again, thank you for your responses. So I am hoping that after everything we've covered these last 2 weeks, you have gained a better understanding to why military and civilian collaboration is so important. And you are taking a vital step by being a part of this training. The primary goal of military and civilian collaboration is to make sure that victim survivors receive the same standard of care as a no wrong door approach, which includes seamless services and handoffs, regardless of who that initial point of contact is. And with that understanding, knowing that it's going to require establishing the appropriate relationships with counterparts and having a general understanding of the referrals and resources that we've discussed, And again, with all this information, not expecting you to be the expert, but have those connections in place so that you can call up your military or civilian counterpart or advocate without compromising the privacy or choice. And if you are not currently working with your counterparts on the military side, just know you may not be offering a military connected victim survivor with all of the resources or options available to them. So it's critical that you have a CCR team, you facilitate cross training, and ultimately look at MOUs to formalize partnerships that promote victim care and offender accountability. So, where to begin? Well, when establishing a CCR team, it's important that your team reflects the community you are serving. And considering all of the training sessions we've had, folks on your CCR team should include military advocates, community professionals, financial personnel, those who belong to the LGBTQ community, or those who have resources for rural communities and those with living with disabilities. It's important that your teams meet regularly with the understanding that the agenda, mission, goals, and the entire responsibility of the CCR team does not rely on any one person or agency. So it is a shared responsibility. And for that team to stay committed, the goals that are created need to come from the entire team. And we'll touch on those in a few slides as well. So I see a question in the chat. If we are not on a CCR, should we look to see if one already exists nearby we can join before starting a new one? So great question. We will get to that. And so for those folks who said no or I don't know to belonging to a CCR, I do encourage you, thank you, Christy, for bringing up this question, to look into your community or organization. And maybe you can be part of developing one if there aren't any related to military and civilian. Because overall, when our teams are operating at their best, the services that victim survivors may access in any given community become less fragmented, more holistic, trauma-informed, and accessible. So again, that first step to developing the CCR is to bring the right folks to the table to help you plan. And sometimes communities will bring a core team of preventative and response personnel to begin planning with the intention of adding other folks later on. However, those who are othered, such as military, representatives from communities of color, survivors, and key stakeholders, need to be invited to this process early on to help co-create with you. And ensuring that the right folks are at the table will strengthen that committed team and help carry out the collective approach. Most importantly, the team must work towards shared agendas, goals, and the ultimate vision of ensuring that victims are safer as a result of reaching out for help. So I understand that each CCR team, depending on their purpose, will have unique mission and goals. For the purpose of preventing and responding to DVSAS, we have established these 4 goals that we use throughout our programs. And I'm not going to go into significant detail, but I do encourage you to reflect on these 4 and maybe assess your current or future CCR team. Keep in mind that if you decide to invite military members to your existing CCR, it's important to consider how they will be integrated into the team and if there will be sufficient space to elevate the unique issues of military connected survivors. So one question to ask yourself is, will your CCR address domestic and dating violence, sexual assault and stalking of military connected survivors, or do you need to separate and have different committees and teams? So to answer that question in the chat, it really depends. Is the current team that's in your community already addressing these issues? And are they doing it successfully? And if not, maybe then you do need to establish a different team. There can also be subcommittees, there can be working groups and steering committees. So keep those all in mind as well. One significant roadblock is that there is often distrust between military and civilian agencies due to institutional betrayal and historical trauma that I touched on the first day, and also issues centered around a lack of understanding and concerns about confidentiality. So it's important to consider how you will address these potential roadblocks from the beginning to include cross-training and MOUs, like I said earlier. And it's important to encourage the CCR team members to bring up any other challenges that they anticipate in making the CCR team so that you can address and plan for those in the beginning. In the chat, we have this, they separate, could come together. So I'm assuming that's meaning they could be separate in the beginning and then come together to work together. Sometimes that's how the subcommittees work. And if I misspoke, Nancy, please correct me with what your comment was intending to say. So when looking to build your CCR team, here are some questions to consider, such as who will be the chair or coordinator? Will this team be new or build upon an existing? Is there the capacity for that? And again, who will be invited and what will you address? As we previously discussed, ensure the appropriate folks that are impacted within the community are there. They need to be part of that planning process and also identify potential roadblocks. Most importantly, ensure that this team allows for open discussion and for all voices to be heard. So key partners, if you recall on the first day, I did include this slide to get you to start thinking about who should be partnering with. There were also several great suggestions from the group in the chat on the first day, such as security and lock change companies, the vet centers, chaplains, and mechanics. So not saying that all these individuals or groups should be at the CCR. However, please reach out to them to coordinate services. So when you are assisting victim survivors, there are multiple services that can be provided for that immediate crisis state to even 1 to a few years down the road. So a sneak peek at your first CCR meeting, again, whether that's a pre-existing team that you have grown to include military partners or a brand new CCR team. Understanding that the goals of these meetings is not only information sharing, but also building relationships. So the first meeting and also every meeting should provide an opportunity for team members to connect, learn more about one another and build trust. We want to be sure that every CCR team meeting is multi-directional and not a space for one-way communication. Understanding that maybe this might be challenging for military connected folks coming from that hierarchical and very structured environment. So meetings should model how the CCR team is and how you want it to be created. They should model engagement, collective leadership, and authentic conversation. You will develop the agenda for your first meeting depending on your agency or community context and maybe what is already in place. A question that we often get is, what should we discuss at that first meeting? And here are some potential topics that are not listed, but an overview of the team, the goals and issues you are trying to address, also the purpose and role of the CCR team specifically, including the expectations of CCR team members and what that means to be active participants, and how to provide input and direction, and also establish meeting frequency and meeting times. Also discuss how to share and exchange information learned. And most importantly, which again might be challenging for military folks, speaking as someone who experiences challenges with this, is to move at the pace of humanity. So we don't want to overwhelm our team members, but again, allowing it to be a collaborative space to address domestic and dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking in order to bring systemic change. Excuse me. So one of the key outcomes of military and civilian collaboration and also a combined CCR team is the development of MOUs. Having everything in writing for formal procedures can significantly help in streamlining and ensuring that victim survivors will receive the same quality of care and support, again, regardless of who that initial point of contact is. So MOUs are extremely helpful in that they establish roles and responsibilities. They assist with data and information sharing when confidentiality arises, and they solidify relationships and designated points of contact. They also foster sustainability. So sometimes we have relationships with partner organizations, but really there is that one person who is the champion that is spearheading and the passion and the team in order to focus on the issues. But what happens when that individual goes on vacation or is moved to a different location? Again, very common in the military to be moved. We need to have these standards in place so that all of the hard work doesn't just fall apart because that one person is out. MOUs can be developed between law enforcement agencies, medical treatment facilities, or military medical, particularly around handling of evidence in restricted reports. And also, again, with all of the civilian agencies that you all work with or connected to, such as the domestic violence shelters, rape crisis centers, and counseling agencies. So of course, when we talk about partnerships, collaborations, and MOUs, we must also understand how those partnerships should be implemented from the understanding of differing cultures, lived experiences, historical and intergenerational trauma, and how that may be impacting the folks that show up to our spaces, our CCR teams, because as we know, often people end up in the advocacy field or as service providers who have also experienced trauma. So a definition borrowed from the Urban Strategies Council reads, quote, "Equity is fairness and justice achieved through systematically assessing disparities in opportunities, outcomes, and representation, and redressing those disparities through targeted actions." So this definition speaks to the needs of the many different groups and populations that function under structural constraints that have for generations prohibited their ability to thrive resulting in severe and compounding marginalization and oppression. So establishing ethical and equitable relationships will ensure that we are not adding on to anyone's trauma or oppression. And building such relationships allows us to leverage our resources, deepen the impact of our work and our policies, and extend our outreach. And what does that look like? Well, listed here are some key components that are foundational, keeping in mind that centering equity requires recognizing that sometimes diverse populations likely have different experiences than the organizations who are trying to help them, unless it's a specified organization. And that's okay if they do have different experiences, but we need to recognize that if we are not part of that in group, we often don't know enough to be as helpful or as effective as we should be. So we need to listen and learn and distribute resources. And that includes compensating SMEs, partners, and those with lived experiences so that our programs and services can also be culturally responsive. So culturally responsive programs maintain a set of attitudes, perspectives, behaviors, and policies, both individually and organizationally, that promote positive and effective interactions with diverse cultures, which means understanding the core needs of your target population and the community, whether that is military, civilian, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, LGBTQ, and designing services and materials that meet those needs strategically. Keeping in mind that culturally responsiveness is dynamic and an ongoing process that requires a long-term commitment. So we've looked at culturally responsive programs and services, and what does it mean to be a culturally responsive person? Well, when keeping in mind everything we've discussed from that first day about culture and throughout these different sessions, when you encounter those who come from a different background, culture, language, lived experience, or maybe you are deployed, sent, or traveled to a different location, especially those locations with significant history of historical trauma and colonization, keep in mind some of these points. You are examining your own beliefs, prejudiced, and not making assumptions about the land, people, their abilities or disabilities or mindsets. But again, you are connecting with that individual person as someone who is respectfully curious about their lived experience, understanding that for certain communities and people that rapport and trust will not come easily. Referring back to Karen's presentation from Kimberly, that different populations have different experiences, have experienced significantly impactful oppression and trauma because of their community group. We need to keep these in mind when we are developing our CCRTs, when we are creating MOUs, and also connecting with our partner organizations to include law enforcement, military, and everyone else. So again, I'm bringing back this slide from day one because, again, bringing your attention to how important relationships and partnerships can be and why military and civilian collaboration are vital, and they can impact our work. And our work can be more impactful when it's done with cultural responsivity, being equitable and ethical, and the understanding of the different communities and how they are impacted and what that means when we are supporting them if they come from a different group than we are. So the intention of this grant project is to provide training and technical assistance to civilian advocates, community and allied professionals with enhancing their understanding of unique military dynamics and barriers to improve their services in supporting military connected survivors. However, please understand that addressing domestic and dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking does require the entire community, and that includes military and civilian professionals and advocates, to support all survivors. And I have a question here at the end that says, what reparations or amends need to be taken? And that can be between the community, law enforcement, military, communities of color, LGBTQ, and Native and Indigenous peoples who the military bases or installations are residing on. So before even establishing an MOU or going in with the intention of we need to create the CCR team, maybe first there are some relationships that need to be rebuilt and amends need to be taken. So please keep that in mind. And I have a quote from Dr. Bruce Perry, which reads, "Relationships matter. The currency for systemic change was trust, and trust comes through forming healthy working relationships. People, not programs, change people." So another gentle reminder, the importance and impact of relationships. Systemic change begins with people. Are there any thoughts on that quote? Or maybe if anyone wants to share their experience in the chat of how you have developed or amended relationships and how that has impacted your collaboration to help victim survivors. I see amen in the chat. Yes. It is crucial in doing our job to help others. Have the conversation. People, not programs, change people. Changing the culture. Yes. And I will say it's very important for organizations to not only take this to the relationships or external partners or the victim survivors or clients they are serving, but also internally, right? Between coworkers, between our staff members, and also for ourselves. How are we treating ourselves? What wellness and self-care are we doing for ourselves, our staff, and those we serve? In the chat, it says always open to talk. Yes. I see that is true, but with a strong team and good follow-up, progress, not perfection. Yes. I see a comment in the chat. I was a victim of military domestic violence, and he was an MP on base. It has really helped me in my position helping people. Yes. Thank you for sharing. Stepping out of one's comfort zone and engaging all cultures. Thank you. Ready to listen. Massage therapy for self-care. Thank you. As social workers, we often need to be reminded that we are to serve the people and not to collect a check. Yes. I also see safety, self-confidence, healing, connections, confidentiality, mental health, well-being, and trauma recovery. All of these things help a person to recover through all of the pain. Being mindful of these fragile situations are critical, and make sure we don't allow for ourselves to enter a burnout phase. Taking care of ourselves to and maintains empathy. Yes, thank you so much. If anyone has any wellness or self-care habits that they would like to share in the chat, please do so. I'm going to go back to the comment that says ready to listen. Yes, and I think this expands on how appreciative I was to see all of the questions coming in from Karen's session with a genuine curiosity and authenticity, because you want to know so that you can do better to improve and serve victims and clients. So being curious and authentic. Self-care, I see hot yoga, the beach, crocheting, bird watching, nature walks, church and volunteering in my community, walk dogs at the shelter. I love that. Cycling, yes. Unplug, so important. And after this session, you are done for this training. So I encourage you to unplug and take care of yourself, and maybe try out some of these new self-care habits that are in the chat. Coloring books, exercise, meditation, massage therapy, acupuncture, pedicures, art, listen to music. Thank you. Keep sharing as I move to the next slide. So this one is going to be a little bit interactive, and I'm going to ask you to take some time for yourself to kind of reminiscent on all of the information we covered, the case study that we used, the hypothetical, and take a few minutes to write down some next steps that you can take towards either developing a CCR team or identifying who are the appropriate military and civilian points of contact that you need to connect with. And we're just going to take a few minutes. And I would like you to write down 3 action items that you're going to take. And one of those being an immediate action item that you're going to do in the next 2 weeks. And also, if you have time, identify one new partnership that you will reach out to. So a few moments. And then if you feel comfortable, on the next slide, I'm going to ask for a few shares. So we'll take, let's do 5 minutes. I feel like I should pull up some music. While you're doing that, I'm going to pull up some music. Can you all hear that music? Okay, let me share. Alrighty. I see some responses coming through. Needs assessment. I missed some. Establish the needs of the individual, building a cohesive team, coordinate a luncheon. We have a naval academy in our state. I will reach out to see what type of civilian outreach they have and maybe offer to engage. Yes. Sometimes it starts as something as little as having resources at both partnerships of each other's services, hosting events together, outreach events. So we're not duplicating efforts, but really creating that cohesive space and support from the community and military side. I will go over to base, introduce myself, and ask if they would like our materials, speak to CID, SHARP, and FAP, create a new partnership with the medical clinic. Love it. Offering a meeting, develop a point of contact distribution list. Yes. Network and research immediately. Learn local agencies. Thank you. Review current policy, brainstorm as a team, and collaborate with more agencies. Get more involved now with SAPR VA colleagues. Get to know the work environments and jobs of our local VLCs. Developing our CCR is knowing our resources better. Yes. Find and connect with my local military advocates. Create a specific resource folder. Yes, and I did drop in the chat NOVA in partnership with NCVLI. They were there on Monday with us. We have created a CCRT assessment, and that's just a self-assessment for community agencies. And I will re-put that in the chat, and I will also make sure it's in the student center. That's also a good starting point. So thank you for everyone's share. Please, I encourage you to follow through with all of your action plans. So important that we are moving beyond just information gathering, but again, into action and building partnerships, making amends so that we all can be the change for systemic change, culture change, social change to support all victim survivors. And as we close today, I do want to share a little bit about NOVA. Very passionate about the work that NOVA does. We were founded in 1975 and we're the first victim advocacy organization of its kind in the US. And we continue to be a recognized leader in victim advocacy, education, and credentialing. There are a number of different programs that we have and provide support to. They are listed here. If you're interested, please feel free to join our email distribution list.